Actually, yeah, fuck it. I completely forgot about that. Nintendo sued Palworld finally. Yeah, to my knowledge, it's really a scarier lawsuit because it's not just copyright infringement, it's a patent one. Which means they're suing to own the patents on what, just like furry monsters?
Being caught. So the catching system is like the main thing that apparently that's the whole patent lawsuit. Like they're saying that like, oh, it's infringing on that, like it's basically like a 1-to-1 copy, and like, you know, we want our money. So 15 million is what the payout is, and it is a kind of bullshit.
Man, they're really mad about that Switch 2 leaking, huh?
Would they be mad? It's not like a bunch of shit like really got like leaked, in my opinion. Like it could have been worse, honestly, for Nintendo in that case. Like,
yeah,
truthfully.
like no games leaked at all. So I guess that might be a bigger one. Who knows? I mean, I wasn't prepared to talk about this truthfully, but a patent one is a little bit different. So you're saying if I go outside my house right now and film myself just throwing a tennis ball at my dog.
Yeah.
You're saying Big N could come sue me for that because I'm throwing a ball at a small animal and capturing its attention.
Yep.
That's fucked up.
That is fucked up.
I'm surprised it took them this long, truthfully. I mean, I don't know why they didn't come for them before.
You know, that is true. Like, I know we've said our bullshit with Nintendo, like, before. And, like, I even kind of thought, like, Palworld kind of... I don't think I really said this, but, like, I think deep down I kind of felt Palworld kind of really had, like, no chance, I feel, of winning this just because, like, it is Nintendo. I'm not even saying that, like, whether, like, and this has nothing to do with, like, the validity of the lawsuit or whatever, but it, like, you know, I think patents are really, like, their own, they're their own beast, truthfully, because as far as, like, this whole thing goes right now, like, because now what? Is Nintendo gonna go after, like, Dragon Quest and a bunch of other games that have, like, this whole, like, animal catching system and everything?
No,
like, yeah, exactly. Because, like, I know that this was really just, it was meant to send a message. Like, lack of a better word. Like, that's what it was. Like, this was not really, like... Because they could give a fuck about the 15 million, about, like, about the 15 million that they got from the guys.
Are you really saying this is a fucking Joker moment for Nintendo? Is that what you're trying to get at right now?
Yeah.
That like, the 15 million doesn't matter because it's not about money.
I know we mean, David, but truthfully, like, that's kind of where I'm, how I'm seeing it. Because, for one, they could give a fuck about the 15 million. They could wipe their ass with 15 million, Nintendo. Like, let's be real. Yeah, so, like, you know, the 15 million doesn't fucking matter at all to them. It's not about, as you said, money. It's about sending a message.
I don't know, man.
It's kind of been made loud and clear. Like,
Game Freak's been delivering stinkers. And
of course,
at a certain point, you know, that's the funny part about that is that, you know, Nintendo is very on par with quality when it comes to their games. They delayed Metroid Prime 4 because the company that they hired to make it, they didn't live up to their standards, so they scrapped the whole thing and just gave it to Retro Studios, which they then bought because Retro Studios makes all their games anyway. Mm-hmm. Same with fucking Warner Brothers buying Player First games for multiverses, all that shit, right? Mm-hmm. But Pokemon has always been the exception that proves the rule because Nintendo always had a bit of a sense of plausible deniability there in saying, we just own Pokemon.
Forever.
We make that shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, the best part is that game sells well, we make a ton of money. Game doesn't sell well and gets heavily scrutinized and criticized. We didn't fucking make it. That was Game Freak that did that shit.
Here's the thing, though, too. Like, Scar and Vi, which, you know, did get panned, like, by fans and even critics alike. Like, it got panned like to shit. And, like, you know, obviously released it. We all knew about it, like, how bad it was. But the numbers don't lie. People still fucking bought a shit ton of the copies, and like, so at the same time, like, you know,
3 days it became the top selling Pokemon game in 3
like,
days.
Nintendo, like, and even Pokemon Company, I guess, in general, like, all they see is numbers at the end of the day. Like, this is all companies in general. Like, all they see is numbers. It's like, oh, like, they could give a shit about the criticism because scoreboard, people still fucking bought it. So clearly, like, you know, our shitty business practices, or, like, you know, even our like lack of giving a fuck clearly like thing. Like, you know, it like why would we need to change it? And
I'm just trying to understand if there's a method to the madness. Because if you're saying this isn't about money and it's about sending a message, you really think this is just Daddy N swinging their cock around?
Because I truthfully feel so.
There's the wholehearted difference to my knowledge. I'm not a lawyer, all right, especially when it comes to copyright law and stuff like that. But I know the difference is that copyright law is like, hey, we put Pikachu in our show. He's like the fucking main character. He's like our character's pet. Other than that, it has nothing to do with Pokemon. We just really fucking like Pikachu, so we put him in the shit. You know, he's so cute. He got Pikachu. Like, that's obviously copyright infringement. They take it. But a patent is a whole different story because that's when it sort of becomes about ideology. That's when it becomes about ideas, right? Because the whole like it's the whole notion of throwing a ball at a creature and capturing it. That's crazy because I mean, you know. You're talking about how are they gonna sue fucking Dragon Quest or whatever? Like, no, Nintendo and Square Enix are like this. I can tell you last night, after last night especially, I can tell you that Nintendo and Square Enix are like this. I literally beat a boss in Mario RPG last night, and then the game went, and then I got really hard and came everywhere in my room, and I had to wipe it down and hire some cleaners to get all the cum off the walls. But other than that,
yep.
If it's really just about patent, then this patent had to have been designed for Palworld specifically, and that's why they might have been taking so long to come for them. Because at a certain point, you can't put it past Nintendo. This is the company that made a guy their indentured servant for life. After the guy was selling or had a whole like ring of like modded Switches where you could just and like ROMs of the games and stuff that you could just like literally get without purchasing. And yeah, that dude and Nintendo wasn't their right to fucking sue that guy. But Jesus Christ, like. A third of his salary for the rest of his life? You don't even fucking need that money. You wouldn't be getting that money.
But, you know, again, it's not about the money. It's about the message.
No, I wholeheartedly believe they had to have believed that, or like have like a certain lack of faith in Game Freak, or at least in their ability to fucking. No, you're right. No, you're right.
Because David, again, like
it takes a big man to admit when he's wrong.
They could,
and I am taller than you.
They could give a fuck about the money. They're literally wiping their asses with $15 million, probably daily. Like they could give a fuck about the money. It does not matter to them. Because, like, you know, again, like, oh, yeah, Nintendo's such an indie company. Oh, please, like, you know, like, please understand. Like, you know, we're just a small company that is also worth, like, the amount of a small country when it comes to revenue. You know, it's, like, Nintendo is up there with Disney, man. It's,
Look, I can tell you firsthand, like, from talking to some of those people, they welcome the comparison of being called the Disney of video games, as the general public just pretty much butter them up to be at this point, because they really are, not just in terms of their money, but in terms of their image, like, and their brand, for sure.
It's also the reason why, like, I think, at least, not commercially, so to speak, because, like, I think Sony and Microsoft both have like kind of branched out to other things, and like they've I think that's also kind of helped them along the way. Like they're not just strictly like a video game company, like especially specifically Sony in particular. But as far as like video games are concerned, like there is no like Michael Jackson of like that entire like group than Nintendo. Like no one's the king than Nintendo. It's just the way things have been for a long time. Like, and I mean, you know, and I'm not saying that to kind of like be, or I guess sound like a Nintendo fanboy and like, you know, oh, like this guy just loves to suck Nintendo's cock and like, you know, it's just like, blah, blah, blah. Like it. I think it's kind of undisputed now at this point, considering like, at least if we're just strictly talking about video games, no one's really done it better than Nintendo. Like I think that goes without saying. Like
it's like that dick tastes bad sometimes, but you still just love how it feels in your mouth.
Yeah. Like, you know, it's just, like, the thing that always keeps you coming back. And, like, I can't even... And the thing is, this is a big one, too. Like, and I don't think it's kind of said enough. More people own a Switch than a fucking PS5.
Well,
like,
okay.
Just the numbers alone, like, kind of... There's just more people with Nintendo than with a PS5.
as far as this goes, I don't know if it just has to do with just Nintendo or Japanese culture in general going back, because this isn't the first time stuff like this has happened. In Nintendo's case, and I'm quoting the PC Gamer article here, interview that they did with Kirk Sigmund, they've been pretty fastidious about making sure that their concepts, whenever they fucking can be patented. That little reserve, that little trademark you see at the end of Nintendo's logos and whatnot. You can't make a fucker that looks like Mario and then just do whatever the hell you want. You know? Peppino and like Pizza Tower looks different enough, you know what I mean? But if your character looked exactly like Mario and then you just say, duh, it's not Mario, that doesn't typically work.
Because then you get a situation like Steamboat Willie where, like, you know, literally anyone it's basically what do they call it? A free... I was going to say
public domain.
I was going to say free real estate, but oh my god, that's not
the same. The second Mickey Mouse entered the second Winnie the Pooh or whoever. What was the one that just entered the public domain? Fuck, it was a bit Winnie the Pooh. The second Winnie the Pooh entered the public domain.
Oh,
it's free real estate.
It's
for that shitty MonsterVerse they're trying to make, where they spend like $10,000 on a movie and make like $10 million just because people go to hate watch it. Oh man.
Hate watching, it is what it is, though. Like, you know,
for movies especially, TV is a different ballpark. But Nintendo, as I was saying, they patent things whenever possible. There's one that they did back in the N64 era where I think they jokingly called it the omnibus patent, where they put in everything from what the controllers looked like to how they operated, to how the 64 operates, to how the processors in the N64 operated, to how Mario moves, to how Mario goes from one world to another. They tried to fit everything into one big-ass patent. And I think that's the difference between patenting and copyright infringement. They actually can't come after Palworld, I don't think, just because they look like Pokemon if the designs are different enough. Because inspiration is one thing. Nintendo can't go after Astrobot because they don't have a patent on the platformer. They can't do that. That's like a whole different ballpark, really. If they tried, then I'm sure they would have if they could have, or if they would have even tried. But like, they can't go like, oh, Astrobot kind of moves like Mario, so we can't do that. It's like that monopolizes that assent. I don't know if there's trust busters involved in that, but I think that's the difference between like copyright infringement and like patenting. Because copyright infringement, to my knowledge, I think is when like, excuse me, is when I think that's when like you blatantly like use something that's not yours, and like just try to pass it off as your own or use it in something where it's not allowed, where it's not a public domain character like Santa Claus or the Grim Reaper or Puss in Boots, technically, or at least the version of Puss in Boots that exists in the fairy tales, not the DreamWorks version. They have a patent on the DreamWorks version that they made. You have to make Puss in Boots look different in your thing, blah, blah, blah. And then patenting is when, like, I think you try to own specifically how something works, and that prevents like another company from using it. And I think that's why they're going after Palworld with patents instead of copyright infringements, because Palworld I think is technically different enough because it's got guns and shit, and like the models aren't exactly Pokemon to the point where it's not, you know, there could be some litigation involved where you could say, hey, this isn't technically a ripoff of Pokemon, even though it's very fucking clearly there. It's so overly complicated, truly. And as far as things entering the I don't know.
Public domain?
Yeah, as far as things entering the public domain, it's funny you brought up Steamboat Willie as the example, because it was in, I don't remember what it was. It was either I think it was the 50s. No, it wasn't the 50s. It was the 50s or the 70s. I think it was after Walt was gone, where Mickey Mouse was about to enter the public domain. It had been 50 years since his creation. That was the cutoff. Where if the character's been made for 50 years, all of a sudden, character is now property of the state. It is not your character. It is everyone's character.
Yeah.
Disney didn't want that to happen. They did not want him to enter the public domain, so they lobbied Congress to like extend the length of whatchamacallit, to extend the length of copyright with copyright holding like indefinitely, I think. That's the whole fucking reason that law even exists, is because public domain used to be the law of the land, where if the character is 50 years, all of a sudden you can use this character in your own things. Disney just didn't want that, and now that's just how copyright law works for everybody.
But can we also kind of agree, if I was Disney, I probably would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah, my father was screaming at the television in the Adam Ruins Everything episode that explained that. He was like, "Was this guy a fucking communist? Like, what the hell is going on here?" And in the back of my mind, I was just kind of like, yeah, You know, I have a dream of one day making a character and franchising.
And I want to own it.
And franchising them. And it's not even that I want to own it. It's just I don't want him to be used in any way the world wants. Like,
Because
any
like people can now
fucking
make
way.
Steamboat Willie porn if they wanted to. Like,
I mean, you can make actually they could already do that because that's where parody falls in line. They're actually already allowed to do that.
I know, yeah. So,
Fun fact: there are 2 Nintendo-themed pornos that were made in the 1980s with live-action actors. Nintendo owns the rights to those movies, Dennis. They purchased them from the porn companies just to pull them off the shelves and to ensure that they would never be seen by the light of day ever again.
So there's no way to watch those at all?
They got them off before the internet existed, so I don't know if anybody ripped them and uploaded them.
Fuck! that dude would probably get like ninja'd off the face of the planet, like if they found out. Mysterious circumstances, yeah.
P. Diddy, like a hunger strike. He said he's on suicide watch in prison. So if he dies, you know, we're just fucking. But anyway, yes.
If he dies, he dies.
So I think if Sony dropped a controller that had like a giant wriggling dong in the center of it that just had an extra handle like the N64 controller does, I think at the time, they wouldn't be allowed to do that. I think that's how it works. And I think it goes vice versa. I don't think it's not just, Nintendo's on top and then Sony and Microsoft have to comply to them. No, I think it's a give and take, if I'm not mistaken, where like they can't make controllers exactly like them or something with processors. And that's where the technology comes into play. And I don't know why you're listening to this podcast to like get a grasp of that, because I don't fucking understand how that works. But the point is, I think that's the difference between patents and copyrights. They can't claim like, oh, you just knocked off the vibe of Pokemon. You have to show whatever is being defined by the patents, which up until now didn't exist, which they made specifically for Palworld, to prove you ripped us off and you're profiting off of literally our work.
But then the thing is with this patent is that it came out like fucking like so conveniently. Like they decided to push it through the patent office like thing. I think I heard like around the time of when Palworld was kind of like, you know, kicking off and like I guess doing well. It just seemed really sus, and I guess even you know, obviously hindsight's 2020, like it makes sense. Like, you know, how do I want to say this? Like, you know, it was all like strategically planned. I feel that like, okay, like we're just gonna push this patent through, and then once it goes through, hey, by the way, you're infringing on this patent that like, you know, we just pushed through. Give us money. And like, because it didn't really seem like that patent was in place. I need to go and like look through this again, just to see like if there is like some fuckery going on in there. Because like, I think truthfully, I think Nintendo also kind of underestimated just how successful Palworld will be. Because like that like the first day or like first night that like kind of like, you know, that it was kind of going around and like everyone was kind of talking about it, was kind of nuts, you know, like lack of a better word, like, you know, it was the buzz around it was like almost akin to when Helldivers was kind of around like the first couple of weeks, and like everyone was just kind of like just wouldn't shut the fuck up about it. There was memes overnight for that game, and it was the same for Palworld too. And this was a lot of like not even just like normal I guess like non-Pokemon fans, but like a lot of Pokemon fans came out in droves for this game, because finally like it was kind of taking that formula and doing something new. And, you know, basically they were also kind of saying like, you know, fuck Nintendo and like fuck Pokemon Company, like, you know, fuck whatever they want, like, you know, I love this game and like blah blah. Like it was very much like a mix of like hooray and also like Nintendo can go fuck itself because of this game. And, you know, one can argue, like, you know, it's like, it kind of just seemed like, even off a glance, like Palworld kind of seemed like it was kind of going off of borrowed time at that point, just because, like, historically, for what we know of Nintendo, like, you know, it's like, they're not going to let this thing just even be around for that long. You know what I mean? Like, it really was just like a matter of time. And eventually, yeah, we got our answer with it, and, you know, it did happen.
They let fan games go by the wayside most of the time. It's really only until they get big enough that
this thing was also making money. That's the thing. Like fan games and ROM hacks that don't have any money involved, like they don't give a fuck. But like,
there's a huge one called Super Mario Eclipse that just dropped.
Yeah.
You heard about that? Like the full
Yeah.
scale,
I saw the
like,
trailer
Sunshine
for it. Like
sequel. That shit looks amazing.
Yeah.
And
it's free.
Yeah, and it's free. So they're not profiting any off of it. And
Yeah.
I really think that might be Nintendo's biggest thing, because I thought they would come for that immediately. Maybe they're still waiting on it. Maybe because they don't have to draft anything up like that. I mean, that's from an over 25-year-old game.
It's only though if they ever decide to like, oh, we want to start up a Patreon. It's like, oh, now you're playing with fire because now you have money involved. That's the only thing. Like, if you are gonna make a fan game, but that's the thing. These guys with Palworld, like I don't know if it's hubris on their part or they just really thought that like nothing was gonna happen. Because like, if I was them and if I was in that team, I would be a little bit scared of making something that was like almost blatantly like a Pokemon like offshoot or something. But it just seemed like these guys like just didn't give a fuck. Or if at the very least, like, and this is maybe just me, I'm probably tinfoiling hatting a lot in this, but like, I like to think that, I don't know if by the end of this judge's decision that like, you know, the $15 million that they have to pay up to Nintendo, if that also entailed them shutting down operations entirely and like kind of just shutting down the game and like in general. Because like, if this is just them getting a fee, like getting like those damages, like getting the 15 million like from them, and if they're still allowed to persist, then it makes me believe that perhaps Palworld probably made that money and then some, where they figured like, okay, we could pay this 15 million and just not give a fuck anymore, because like if that's all they want from us, then okay, fine. Like, I don't know if they've cease and desisted like the game at all, but if 15 million was all that, if 15 million
is just a letter, you know, patent's a whole different thing. Right?
But like, if that's all they're looking for is that 15 million, then it's like, I'm pretty sure for these guys that made that money and then some with this game, it's like, fuck it, okay, we'll give you 15 million. Like, we give a fuck, and like, we'll just continue to do what we're doing. Like, maybe they kind of already predicted that they were gonna come after them, so we're gonna hope to God that this game sells really well, and it did, obviously. Like, you know, it made a lot of money for them. Whatever, like, and that money that we get is going to be that cushion money for us, like, for when that lawsuit inevitably comes. Because I'm pretty sure these guys aren't that stupid that, like, they thought, like, they weren't going to come after them. Maybe, like, you know, I said, this is straight up, like, tinfoiling hatting, like, a fuck ton right now. But, like, I can't imagine that these guys were just that stupid enough to think that, like, they wouldn't have anything happen to them. But that's why, like, you know, they saw that, okay, we could probably just continue doing what we're doing anyways, because the game's already doing well. We're already making a lot of money. People are still hopping onto this game anyway. So, like, at the very least, like, we still have a lot of people coming in. So because of that, hey, because of all that money we got coming in, even if they come after us, we'll probably have enough money to kind of help cushion the blow when it inevitably does come.
It depends on the deal that they strike with Nintendo, because truthfully, there is also a chance, believe it or not, this might not go to court. Because Nintendo just wants to get rid of this as best as they can. Palworld just wants to get rid of this lawsuit as best they can, because to your point, Dennis, people are still playing this fucking game. They made so much money
It's not even just on PC, it's on Xbox and PlayStation too.
If they get it, like, good enough of, like, patent specialists, like, on their side, which is going to be harder for them because they're, like, a smaller company, even though they have all the money in the world right now, because of Palworld, or all the money in the world, you know, not relative, really, compared to Nintendo, of course.
Yeah.
They can say, look, we're making a lot of money on this game. We are not fucking pulling it off the shelf. And even Nintendo might not even want them to do that. Nintendo would agree to changes. You know, there was one thing, you know, that Nintendo tried to do recently. They wanted to, Epic Games, or who fucking makes Fortnite again? It's Epic Games, right? Yeah, okay. Epic Games wanted to get Samus in Fortnite. Which would have been perfect. If you wanted to get a Nintendo rep in there, that is the fit. That is the character that you would want to put in there perfectly. Nintendo wanted to do it. If and only if Samus was a Switch exclusive. So it didn't happen. Yep. Because Nintendo's golden rule that they've had for years, ever since, like, made it big in the video game market, our characters will never be on non-Nintendo hardware.
They monopolizing their IPs for their own ecosystem is something that even I would do, low-key. But I think their reasons for doing it is a bit more archaic than perhaps mine, just because it's very much like, because I even think like Nintendo has a bit of arrogance to them that they believe like they are better than Sony and Microsoft. And if I was them, I think I would feel that way a bit, because at the same, like, because I think to a certain degree, there is like plenty of like a hall of fame of video game characters that we love, and famous IPs that like, of course, like we all know and love, like from other different companies, like from Sony and Microsoft, along with Nintendo as well. And like, you know, of course, like they all have like their own like pedigrees, and like, but the thing is that Mario really is like the Mickey Mouse of like that entire fucking like industry. Like no one stands above everyone else other than Mario. And he's just got like that mythic legendary status to him that like, if I was Nintendo, I wouldn't want him to be mingling with fucking Kratos or like with Master Chief, because like, you know, they know that Mario is above them regardless. And as far as like even him being in like other consoles and their ecosystems, it's like I wouldn't really want that either, truthfully, honestly, because, you know, it's because like, if I'm in the mindset of like a Japanese company like Nintendo in Japan, at least, I want to monopolize my character as much as I can. I want to monopolize my IP as much as I can. I don't want to share that with anybody. I don't want to like kind of have them like being in other like consoles and stuff. Like, you know, Mario is Nintendo and Nintendo is Mario, I guess one could say, because it's Nintendo. Like, what other mascot do they have that's as big as Mario? Nobody, really. And like, he's the face of the company. It's the same with Mickey Mouse. He's the face of the company. He's bigger than the president of the company. That's how fucking big he is.
They probably tell them that on the way in, truthfully, whenever.
Yeah, like when he was sworn in, like, yeah, he's just like, listen, you are not bigger than Mario. Just know that. Okay? Yeah. That's all you got to remember.
They probably just pointed him like a picture of him on a wall and be like, he rules us. Yeah, respect him. I would imagine doing that.
Yeah,
for absolutely. Sure. I mean, as you know, because like as stoic as Japanese businessmen are, like, you know, they understand why they're where they're at.
Yeah,
you know, and they're not going to like try and go in and completely disrespect that. Otherwise, they'd get laughed out of the room. Especially with a company that has core values that they can afford, and even some silly core values like never having our characters on another console, which you know is silly or not silly depending on who you ask. Mm-hmm. They abide by those values because they can also afford to based off what they have. And like that's how fucking big picture Nintendo is and how Japanesey they are, like when it comes to like protecting their IPs and stuff. Because in some ways it makes sense, but a big part of the reason people criticize Nintendo for it is because there's a humongous cultural difference there between like how Japan, you know, does these things and how America does. It's not like the basic America court style of yell at the fucking jury to get what you want or some shit. Like in Japanese law, like it's a lot more like, I don't even have a word for it. I don't know how to phrase it.
It's low-key a little bit more authoritarian. Just a little bit. Just the way East Asian like law kind of is, like even nowadays to back then. It's still very much like, you break law, we break legs. Like it's kind of like just that, like, you know, like that sort of way of thinking. I know I could have said that way better, but like I guess comparing it though, like it's, you know, there is just like that almost like, it's like for in East Asian countries, it's like if you break the law, it's like, well, you fucking deserve it, and like you deserve all of the punishment that you got coming to you. Like, and it's very much even like a cultural expectation too, where it's like, you know how like we kind of like shun like let's say people who just got out of jail, like for whatever reason, like, you know, they could have just gone for like a weed charge or something, and like if they come out of jail, like society at large usually kind of like shuns them for like whatever reason, and like. It's like that and then some for a lot of East Asian countries where it's like, we're not only going to shun you, we're going to ostracize the fuck out of you, like community-wise. Okay, yep. Well, I gotta go in a bit, but I will be right back, guys, because I have to go drop off my sister. But I guess keywords before, like, I guess I head out and like we'll come back here. If, you know, just I think if I have to kind of guess where like this whole lawsuit's going within like 5 years or so, like maybe I say 5 years. This could be like over and done with like pretty quick, like within like 2 years or so. But like I don't, unless they say to Palworld that we want your shit off the shelves, then now you have Sony and Microsoft involved as well, because this is also on their fucking platforms as well. And it would be amazing to see Nintendo duking it out with not only just the guys at Palworld, like Pocket Pair, but even, let's say, Sony and Microsoft's lawyers as well. Like, because that's still, like, even if that game's off their shelves, like, off of Nintendo's, like, let's say, shelves, that's still money lost. And, like, that's also something that even Sony and Microsoft can kind of go after them for. Because it's like, look, that's money that you're robbing from us. Fuck whatever you think. Like, you know, that's money that you're robbing from us. And then they're going to probably maybe ask for damages for their part as well, like, on top of that.
They'd be stupid to do that. Truthfully, like, they already make enough money off of Pokemon regardless for that very reason.
But maybe like, it's just another, like, you know, moment that they could use to just fuck with Nintendo. Like, they having been mired in lawsuits like that, like, no one wants to be in that situation usually. But, like, Nintendo being the arrogant motherfuckers that they are, like, they probably be like, yeah, come after us. I don't give a fuck. They probably, like, will be, like, asking them to, like, come after them.
Love you too, Dennis. I have to tell Dennis I love him because he left and came back. But in the time that he was away, I actually got to reading this interview that PC Gamer did with...
oh, yes.
That PC Gamer did with, whatchamadoodle, Kirk Sigeman, who is a regular writer on video game law. And, yeah, because I was citing some stuff in this before. And, you know, some of the stuff he said was like the famous Omnibus, or the infamous Omnibus patents that Nintendo tried to do, because they tried to patent everything the Nintendo 64 did, which was like a comical amount of stuff, and I think they only got one of those claims. But I gotta say, you know, reading all of this and just talking about this, I guess what comes to mind is, you know, I remember back in high school, I used to be really, really passionate about this stuff, because that was when the Marvin Gaye's kids were suing Robin Thicke. For, you remember the song "Everybody Get Up"?
Yeah.
I don't even remember what the fuck that song was called. We were all so sick of it. It played constantly. It's the song he did with Pharrell. Gaye's kids won that lawsuit, and there was a lot of speculation that they shouldn't have. Truthfully.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I mean, as much as Robin Thicke, you were like, yeah, this guy's a douchebag. Him being a douchebag has nothing to do with it being like fair to sue or not. And I remember there was a Malcolm Gladwell piece in one of his books where he was talking about copyright infringement, and he was talking with some musician about it and whatnot, and the musician was getting really heated. Not with him, but just about the whole issue regardless, right? Because one thing a lot of musicians do, or like a lot of music fucking labels do, is because it's relatively new and because IP law is so complicated, because differentiating patents and later patents and continuations and differentiating patents from copyright law, it's like, fuck, what difference, like ripping something off between just something being similar is I could just go da 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 da. I can patent that melody. Like the little melody that I just made, that little derpy ass song that I just sang. Now no one can put a single sequence of notes in that order ever again. That's not how that works. That they can't just do that. Like 3 notes in a row, nobody fucking owns that. You can't own that. You see what I mean? That's not creative
The Fine
enough.
Brothers, as we all remember, also another example, tried to
shit.
copyright the word. Sorry, peek there. The word. React.
Yeah, they literally tried to own a word that already fucking existed that they didn't even invent.
They got laughed out of the courtroom, right?
They got laughed off the internet. They don't even fucking make videos anymore.
Hallelujah.
Because of that
justice.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You know, that's another thing this article talks about here, is that a lot of these times, these cases get laughed out of the room. Believe it or not. With Nintendo's case, though, it's like you mentioned earlier, it's a little bit about assertion and what they can get away with and what they can't. And some things they can and some things they can't. Like, they fucking... Nintendo doesn't have a patent on the general idea of catching monsters. People read these things and they freak out like, oh my god, this covers everything, when in reality it's just the claims. And they have to go through those claims word by fucking word. Nintendo has to prove in every infallible, reasonable section of a doubt to the courts, this is directly ripped from Pokemon, not just something that's inspired by it or similar enough to by it. And then, funny enough, as Japanesey as that is, the Japanese court system, oftentimes as a defense, does the opposite to prove that it really just is hilarious how, like, you know, America's very late stage capitalistic. Japan is, you know, very hyper capitalistic in the sense that as big on intellectual property and copyright infringement as they are, Dennis, they use that shit as a defense too, because very often not, those cases get thrown out because they'll say, they shouldn't have been allowed to file a patent for this in the first place. That's a defense. They're allowed to say that too. And who knows if Palworld will do that if this winds up actually going to court, or if they'll just say, listen, we'll change the game a little bit. We'll make the monsters look a little different. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. We already have enough of a steady fan base. They're not going to leave because of this. Done and done. We don't have to go to court. And who knows if that's what's going to wind up happening, because I don't think Nintendo or Palworld actually wants to go to court over this, because it makes both of them. It makes Nintendo look shitty, and Palworld, they could lose everything. So, it's funny because, like, there's such a thing as overreach, right?
Yep.
It's called overbroad, I think. And that's what happens when these cases usually get thrown out. Because that's where it gets interesting. I'm just going to read this part of the interview verbatim of what Kirk said here in response to being asked, when a video game company is drafting a patent filing, how much accounting for scope do they have to do? If the attempted filing's overbroad, does it just get thrown out, or is that something that tends to shake out in lawsuits afterwards? He says, that's where, I'm going to quote here, and start quote, that's where it gets really interesting. Part of your job when you're writing these patents is to know that if you get too broad, they'll get destroyed during litigation. If someone can go find an example of something that's prior art, they can prove that the patent should never have been granted in the first place, like I just said. Your job, to some degree, or I guess the lawyer's job, or the creator's job even, is to weave that delicate little balance between going overly narrow, which is when you allow everyone to just freely knock off your idea, we didn't patent anything because you've described it so narrowly, and also going too broad to being like, oh, they ripped off everything. They took our monsters. The grass in Palworld looks too similar to the grass in Scarlet and Violet. If a judge is sitting here, he's gonna listen to it like this, like, really? The fucking grass?
You also
really
brought us all out here to listen to this shit. Like, because courtroom proceedings, like, they, I know, like, we always kind of just see them from, like, the perspective of, like, from TV and stuff. But they can get pretty long. I'll say that much. Like, it's,
because no one understands it.
Yeah.
Even the people who make it don't understand it, which is why
even when the lawyers,
like,
yeah, and even when the lawyers, like, actually, like, are, like, just talking straight facts, like, from at least their point of view, like, this is just kind of like the facts as, like, I see them. Most average people, when they hear that shit, they're not gonna know what the fuck is going on. And I think, though, this kind of
Can I continue the quote?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
I wasn't done with it yet.
Go.
Basically, if they're too broad, they give them a pathway to make the patent go away because you give them an opportunity to prove it was already in existence. And even one patent that I think Nintendo had is controlling a player character in a virtual space based on operation input. That alone, you could throw any variety of video game at. As a patent drafter, your job is to make sure this covers your idea without being so excessively broad that it exposes it to prior art. And that's when it just comes down to debate, I guess, being like, really, okay, controlling a player character in a virtual space based on operational input, that's every fucking video game ever made, you dickhead. So you own video games now? That's not how it works. So what they touched on is very important, because in the US, like I mentioned, you have those mechanisms where you can be like, hey, they should never have been a patent on this in the first place. Oh, I have a patent on oil-painted women. So is the person who drew, like, that daisy in the background, did they violate fucking law by drawing a woman in the background? You see, some are just so ridiculous that you can't make it up almost. That. And to bring up an example of that this guy brought up, somebody tried once to assert against Blizzard about Dungeons and Dragons. They tried to cite Dungeons and Dragons manuals to prove that the whole concept was not new because it was in there. And that's where Kirk here thinks that this is going to pan out. They're saying that if Nintendo asserted one of these patents and they've gone overly broad, they might have just exposed themselves to Palworld finding proof that these concepts aren't new. And because this is drafted fairly broadly, even in Japanese, you can get clever about what games you're looking at as prior art, what references you're looking at. You can always just whip out Dungeons and Dragons, because that's always a good example of how characters interact in role-playing games. You see what I mean? How often does something come around where it invents a genre? People were freaking out on Twitter because, like, oh, is Nintendo going to come after Rivals of Ether? because it's a platform fighter and Smash Brothers invented the platform fighter. Are they gonna fucking do that? Is the only reason they haven't gone after that with Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl and Multiverses because they'd have to go up against Nickelodeon and fucking they'd have to go up against fucking Viacom and Warner Brothers.
Which could go on for a long time as well.
Yeah, companies that can, to an extent, be bigger than Nintendo, and maybe that's where they're like, oh, okay, No. or if they realize just some patents are ridiculous and you can't own, like, literally every facet of something despite even trying to. So, in some similar mechanisms from Japanese law, they've done that.
Japanese.
That's like a fucking Japanese and a Lebanese person.
Just all, like, mixed together.
It's when a Japanese person and a Lebanese person fuck. Or like a black person and like Japanese, they're blackanese.
It's so funny though.
Yeah. So sometimes it's funny with how stringent those lawsuits can get. If they're on the defensive side of things, if they're a big company, like say somebody tried to be an idiot and fucking sue Nintendo for ripping them off, Nintendo could just be like, no, you should not have a patent on that in the first place. But Nintendo's so big that they wouldn't even mess with that in the first place. I think that has to do
they wouldn't give a fuck.
Yeah, they wouldn't give a fuck at that point, But most of those cases, actually, funny enough, it's actually a pretty powerful defense. Those cases like usually lose for invalidity reasons. That means at some point a Japanese case can be brought for infringement, and then the court decided or the jury decided this patent should never have been granted in the first place. You tried to patent rocks. So if there's just a fucking rock, like, in my media, I can't put that there because you own rocks, and now you can sue me because I put a fucking rock in my game. You see what I'm saying? You see the difference between, like, a song being very similar, being like, oh, it's inspired, it's the same genre, it has a similar bass line, to something literally being exactly the same, or saying there's 3 notes in this song that go in the same melodic tempo as the one in mine. You stole from me! Like, you see what I mean? Who decides that?
One would argue maybe the powers that be, but I would even kind of go on to say that, like,
powers that be.
Only saying though, just because at least, like, since the video game industry, I think now has very fully established itself compared to how it was, like, maybe let's say 20 years ago, or even 30. I guess even longer than that, like maybe 30 years ago, like when we were like playing N64 and shit. But over the last couple of decades, like finally, because IP and even patents as well, like, is always, I think, just from even a legal standpoint, like, one would think that they're kind of airtight, but I think for patents especially when it comes to video game development and, like, kind of just, like, the patents that, like, they, like, slapped on there and, like, kind of just brought to the office and say, hey, we want to make this a patent. And, as David even mentioned, like, like, there's, like, you gotta word it very specifically, or otherwise it's gonna be taken as, like, this is just bullshit. That's like my fucking ape brain, like, at least I kind of going off of that, where, like, it's a slippery slope.
They worded very specifically because they made these patents specifically for Palworld.
Yeah, but because that's what I mean. Like, and this is also the reason why that I think this is just a straight up witch hunt and not really like just straight like legal litigation. Like,
one of the later patents was filed specifically after Legends Arceus released, and just a few months before the announcement of the follow-up game that they're making for the Kalos region. So the thing is, what this guy says is that, hey, if they have good patent attorneys and they just have good communication in the companies, then yeah, sometimes, the patent attorneys just don't talk with these devs enough, and because they're busy.
Probably at all, maybe sometimes.
Yeah, but if they were aware of Palworld, which of course they fucking were, or if they were concerned about it, it wouldn't surprise me if they just went back and then just said, we want claims that we think will handle these guys. It's different. Because otherwise, why would,
You think even, like, there's, like, some of the lawyers on their team were kind of just, like, when they got told, like, hey, we want to bring a lawsuit to these guys, and, like, I want you to draw something up, like, to give to the judge to, like, kind of see. But, like...
Fuck yeah.
But the thing is that, like, I'd like to imagine a lot of, like, the lawyers that are on, like, their legal team kind of, like, they're like, yeah, sure, no worries, we're on it. And, like, once the guy closes the door, he's just kind of like, oh, fuck. Like, he was, like, going with his, like, he was, like, just talking with, like, his other team members, and we're just kind of like, look, like, it'd be so easy to draw this up. Like, obviously, like, the guy, like, if I was one of them, I would feel kind of just a little unsure of, like, bringing this up, because it's like, I think maybe to even a certain extent, I don't even think you need to be like a patent lawyer if you look through it and like kind of just even knew anything about video games in general. That maybe this does have a few holes in it that, like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, it's not an open and shut as maybe a lot of them maybe sort of believed. I'm sure there's one guy that has like probably their doubts about this because like it doesn't seem like it's just gonna be like a slam dunk like how all the other lawsuits were, like, you know, in Nintendo's favor, like, you know, like the guy was doing the hack switches and like even like a lot of sites that had like ROMs that like obviously like, you know, are illegal.
Or even just the Smash community in general with like SmashCon being renamed to Supernova, but as the, you know, like it's not about the money, it's about sending a message because the Smash community makes no money. So I guess that is kind of telling a little bit more about Nintendo's agenda, where it's just like, we want our stuff to be this way and we don't want you to fuck with us like that or come for our crown. Because it's the Smash community, they don't make money, but they've come for those and they've had lawsuits to them and like cease and desist and whatnot. So it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? It really like... It's like, are they just trying to scare them, or do they?
I think
like,
it's
have
probably
more
to scare others too.
Yeah,
because they don't want other Pokemon ripoffs.
Yeah, because they have to deal with the Japanese patent system here, not the American one. So the fact that they're doing it there, maybe they have more confidence there. You know, it's just like, hey, you can't go after us.
Well, Pocket Pair is also Japan-based too, anyways. So,
oh, is it?
Yeah, it's Japan-based.
So
yeah,
I guess that makes sense.
So yeah, they're going through their own country's legal system for this shit, and I can't really say whose side I'm really on. I'm definitely not on Nintendo's side, but at the same time, like, I don't really care enough for Pocket Pair and like Palworld enough for me to like have some personal investment in it. I will say though that I am on the side of things where, if they do win this, and if like let's say they're gonna really like, let's say like we'll take them to the cleaners, like Nintendo taking Pocket Pair to the cleaners, it sets a really bad precedence where like now even patents can now be exploitative, or like they can be exploited, and at the same time like just kind of go after fucking anybody and everybody, and like, and I think this will kind of be up to like the judge for this whole thing to kind of like leave it up to them. Because maybe that judge kind of knows. I want to kind of maybe feel that, like, you know, he does also see that way, where it's like, if I do let them get it, or if I let like Nintendo have their way with this, then it's just kind of like, then I'm just gonna have, or at least the Japanese court system will just have more lawsuits coming out about this, and it's usually, like, oh yeah,
in Japan the bigger company typically has an edge.
Typically, but again, like we even said, like this doesn't seem as open and shut as like a lot of the other times, like we've kind of like seen Nintendo take people to court. And the fact that this is a patent as well, and not to mention that we even kind of just read that like patents can by nature be can be very much a slippery slope, depending on how it's worded. Like I could even just see where, like, not a mistrial, I guess, but I could even just see like where maybe the judge kind of just realizes, wow, this is bullshit, and like, you know, maybe the judge will even kind of go to the side of Pocket Pair and just kind of go to Nintendo saying, like, you know, you guys are just fucking bullies, and at the same time, like, you know, maybe you guys should give them damages. Who knows, like, how it will happen, but like I'm only saying and being uncertain about all this because it just seems like it is not really open and shut. Like, and not to mention, it's like, okay, if there's only like a fine, and like, you know, you need to pay this fine to like a fine as in damages to like to use this patent in particular, like with Pocket Pair. It's like, fuck, like I could eat that 15 million, like no problem. And like, you know, for them, like just speaking to them as a whole, again, like they've already been like very successful with the game anyways, where it's like 15 million, I don't give a fuck. Like, yeah, fine, we'll pay 15 million, I don't give a shit.
Maybe they observed, like, you know, probably just end up Palworld was doing. Maybe they observed how well Palworld was doing to work out a settlement that they could afford eventually based off the game's success, because Nintendo would get even worse PR than they normally get.
But do they care about that though? They've gotten worse PR before, and they could give a fuck. Like, I think in the grand scheme of things, like they probably.
I was getting a little conspiratorial there. I apologize.
Yeah, like that's why I mean, like, at least for Nintendo's case, it's like they could give a fuck about their reputation because they also know it's almost, to a certain extent, unstainable. There's not really like anything that they could do other than, like, let's say making Mario gay, that like they would their reputation would just be like fucking tanking, like, and just people would just not trust them anymore. Like, they like they've always had that ground of like we're just protecting our intellectual property whenever it came to like a lot of their stuff, when it came to lawsuits. And like for a lot of times, like even despite us knowing like how scummy Nintendo can be, it is obviously well within their legal right to do so. But in this case, it just kind of seems like, look, we know you're not really doing this for actual, like, you know, objectively legal reasons. You're only doing it because a game did what you were lazily doing, did it better, did it differently, and actually made a fuck ton of money out of it. To the point where, like, let's say this $15 million that you're asking for them, literally they could wipe their ass with that money and they don't give a fuck. Like, it just kind of seems like, you know, again, it's a witch hunt, like, in my opinion. It doesn't really seem like they're doing this just for objectively legal reasons. I think
they're gonna get some. They don't have to prove every infringement is the thing either. Because they could be like, oh, it's Pokemon with guns, that's different enough. They can just cite certain, like, infringements about it. They can just be like, to quote Kirk again, they can say, like, the Nintendo lawsuit, what they can do, it's not uncommon for them to say, I'm going to search claims 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7, and then just pick from the bunch of whatever they think their strongest cases are. And then the worst part is that later on that can snowball, because if they win on their earlier patents, they can file other ones later, and because they won the first one, their Palworld is going to be way unlikely to win the second ones they have, and that's kind of when they're fucked. That's when it snowballs and Nintendo could just fucking come for their asses and like do whatever they want at that point, because the judge ruled with them the first time. So that's when it can get a little scary for them, because that's when shit starts to snowball. But it's whichever ones they think are least likely to be attacked on the basis of prior art. And the thing with that is that, you know, a lot of the Pocket Monsters, not to suck to Nintendo's cock, because obviously they're bullies, but a lot of them are very clearly fucking based off of Pokemon, you know? Yeah. But the thing is that, you know, it's just how do you quantify that? Is it a parody? Not really. Is it like a fucking... Do they have a patent on these specific characters? They do, but if it's one that looks different enough, is that okay? Was uncharted territory however many years ago, and it's less uncharted territory now. It's
still kind of is
there,
though.
But that's what I was gonna say. It still is. This shit is so complicated because it's still relatively new in the grand scheme of, like, you know, the existence of courts and whatnot,
and patents even. Like this whole thing, like, you know, it's not that I follow a lot of court cases, like, you know, just on the regular, but like, you know. For me, it just seems like this is kind of new ground, and it's like, depending on how this pans out, it'll set a precedent for the next like couple of decades, in my opinion, because this is a patent, and I'm not a patent lawyer, obviously.
Yeah,
so
they don't have a copyright case here.
Yeah, exactly. It's just straight up a patent. Yeah. So this is like an idea.
Yeah, like would Nintendo even have a copyright case here? Because it's not 1-to-1. You know, it plays differently. It's got like guns and shit. So it's could easily just be certifiable. It's just like, hey, it's a ripoff that Nintendo, I guess, it can't legally do anything about because it's different. But having a patent on it might make it different. I'm talking myself in circles at this point.
I think we'll wrap it up here, just because I think so. we're like banging around like we're like literally like scraping the barrel like thing with this one at this point. But I think though. What we can, I guess, just kind of glean from all of this is that
first of all, send a message.
Yeah, and then at the same time, like, you know,
still trying to do that.
Yeah, and then at the same time, like, at least as regard to like just kind of all of this going on right now, like, it's still very early. I don't know, we haven't really seen like too many developments other than like, you know, we demand 15 million from your ass, but it's like Palworld's like, I could wipe my ass with 15 million, like, not give a fuck. So like, you know, it's like that's kind of where we're at right now, where like it's kind of still remains to be seen, like, kind of where everything is going. I don't really want to pick sides here, just because, like, you know, it's maybe more shit may come out where it's like, look, like, maybe the whole ripping off Pokemon for Palworld, like, maybe goes even deeper. Maybe that could also be developed like down the line. Who knows? So like, I am just kind of waiting and seeing like how this whole thing develops, because I will say though, there is a big part of me that doesn't want Nintendo to win this, because I low-key think it's bullshit, and like, this is not just a like we're coming after you for legal reasons. It's very much because like we're coming after you because we can and we want to send a message. Like that's from my side of the like fence. Like that's where I'm coming from at least.
Yeah, I don't know if there's space in the lawsuit for Nintendo to just bring up the perceived imitation of Pokemon designs. Because in theory, that's not supposed to work like that, but in practice, it usually does. That's what this guy's saying here. Mm-hmm. They're saying you're telling people if you don't do these things, you're fine, but that in practice, usually what happens. The perception of knockoffs is supposed to be irrelevant. Like, oh, it's a shitty knockoff, whatever. Mm-hmm. But in practice, in U.S. cases too, they go like, hey, this guy's just a competitor who's trying to knock us off, couldn't hack it on his own, so he came up with a knockoff of what we're doing. Which can be enough to tell the story. And does that have a lot of legal weight? Apparently it doesn't. And, they say in Japan that might be harder, but, their cases used to be a little more procedural and a little less America style, where they just yell at a jury to try to convince these people of this. But, so I don't even know if they could come with them on that, but whatever. Like I said, I'm not really picking sides either. I just thought this was an interesting thing to talk about.
And it is. It's just, in general, it's just interesting. Like, yeah.
I kind of hope they just settle. I think it'd be awesome at Palworld. Like, I think it'd be kind of funny if
wipes their ass with 15 million. It's like, yeah, fine, whatever. Take the 15 million. I don't give a fuck.
Not even that. I think it'd be funny if, like, they just settle and, like, they don't have to, like, pay them that much, and Palworld is just able to stay on the market and they just redesign their characters a little, knowing full well they got their bag off of, like, what were essentially, like, Pokemon rip-off designs. Anyway. I don't know. Sure. It's weird because, like, I feel like both sides are right. In some sense,
Oh no, yeah. That's why I'm saying, like, this is kind of like this, with like the way I'm kind of seeing who has the higher ground here, because on one hand, it's kind of no different than with the way like we always perceive Nintendo's like legal actions towards anybody. It's like, look, it's well within their legal right. Scummy as fuck, and it's just like hella douchebaggy, but like it's like still like it's well within their legal rights. So it's like, hey, like they got that going for them. But it's like this one just seems like, look, man, you just kind of look like you just wanted to like take Palworld and dunk its head in the toilet and just like kind of like send a message to like all the other little weak nerds out there that like, you mean business over here. This is my streets. And, but hey, like, this has the chance to kind of develop into something terribly ugly. So, it'll be more fun for us and more content for us, I guess, to like kind of talk about. But, again, that is still very much a remains to be seen with this. So that's our 2 cents, guys.
Yep. And if you want more sense for your piggy bank, you can check us out by subscribing here at youtube.com/Nintoonist. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you think about this lawsuit or this case or whatever, what you think is going to happen, blah, 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 opinions. You can do it on Spotify, too. You can leave comments there now, as well as a quick little 5-star review on your mobile device, or Apple Podcasts if you prefer to listen there. Wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a quick review, leave us 5 stars. It really only takes 2 seconds, and it helps with our SEO a lot. We'll see you next week. I got very little time to edit this one, especially because this fuck wants to get platters. And, yeah, we'll see you in your dreams. But not my dreams. Mine are patented. You can't go into mine, alright? I'll see you in fucking court if you try to look at my dreams.
That's crazy.